Hey, everybody. You are about to hear a brief retelling of the movie Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. Enjoy the movie. A presenter interviews an actor named Rick and his stunt double, Cliff, on a movie set in 1969, asking them about their tight relationship. Cliff and Rick are excellent friends who spend much of their time together, even though they work together. Since Cliff lost his license, he also doubles as Rick's driver. Following their departure from the set, Rick meets with a man named Marvin in a pub. Being a major admirer of Rick's films, Marvin informs Rick that he is progressively losing his position as a leading man in Hollywood after expressing his affection for the parts Rick portrays. He assists Rick in seeing a trend in the parts he has been playing and how filmmakers are now employing him as a villain in order to terminate his character and bring in fresh, exciting performers. He then promises to assist Rick by having him cast in prestigious Italian film productions. After considering it for a time, Rick remains silent. Soon after, he and Cliff leave the pub, but while they're outside, Cliff observes that Rick has become less cheerful. Rick responds that Marvin just told him the truth about how his career is collapsing in response to his question about what's happening. In addition, Rick talks about the offer he received, but he states he has no interest in visiting Italy. Cliff attempts to persuade him that there's nothing wrong with it after listening to his tirade. Cliff keeps trying to talk Rick out of his negative perception of traveling to Italy as they make their way to his residence. But Rick's not ready to give up just yet. They are abruptly forced to halt as some females, among them Pussycat, cross the street and wave at Cliff. After Rick and Cliff go to the house, they watch as Polanski, a well-known director, and his wife, Sharon, pull into the house next door while Cliff continues to grumble. After that, Rick tells Cliff to have a good day and that he will pick him up later that night. After saying this, Rick walks to his trailer where Sam, the director, greets him. Rick becomes unhappy at the fact that his appearance will be drastically altered as Sam discusses the outfit for his new position. He expresses doubt to Sam about whether or not people would recognize him, but the director assures him that's just what he wants. He doesn't want Rick to resemble the role he portrayed last. In another scene, Cliff runs across Pussycat once again while returning home. They exchange waves, and she asks if he might help her go somewhere. Cliff, though, gives the indication that he's heading in a different way. When he eventually arrives at Rick's house, he gathers his equipment before scaling the roof to mend the TV antenna. He keeps thinking about Rick's statement that the director didn't want him working on his project while he's at work. Then he remembers what transpired on the previous filming location. That day, Cliff agrees to serve as Rick's stunt double in the film at Rick's request to Brandy, the director. However, Brandy finds the proposal objectionable since Janet, his wife, does not approve of Cliff. Nevertheless, Rick persuades the director, and Cliff gets the job. Cliff, nevertheless, grows weary of listening to Bruce, the main character, brag about his impressive martial arts skills while they are filming. Sensing this, Bruce challenges him to a race to see who can knock the other person down 3 times faster. Bruce manages to place Cliff on the ground on his first try, but in the end, he is hurled into an automobile, which causes a large dent. Since Janet already harbors animosity for Cliff, she instructs her husband to pursue him off the set, and he complies. It turns out that the automobile is for Janet. Cliff witnesses a man named Charlie entering the Polanski residence, where Sharon and her companion Jay are staying, just as he is returning to his work on the antenna. Jay walks outside to see whether the man is lost after suddenly noticing him. Charlie claims he's searching for a man called Terry, but Jay responds that the address is now the Polanski residence and that Terry is no longer residing there. Sharon emerges to check on things as Jay explains where Charlie may locate the person he's looking for. Charlie also leaves at that moment after Jay declares that everything is well. As he gets ready for the start of the shoot, Rick moves around the set in search of a place to sit. He notices Trudy, a girl, reading a book next to an empty seat. The girl tells him to sit as long as he won't bother her when he requests to join her. Soon after he settles in, he inquires about what she's reading, to which she replies that it's a biography. When she asks about his novel, he replies that it's about a guy who wasn't the best at his profession the last time he did it. He breaks down in tears as he discusses this since it brings back memories of how his career is going, but Trudy comforts him. Later on in the film, Rick encounters James, the main actor, who expresses his happiness at having a talented actor like Rick portraying the antagonist. But he can't resist bringing up a main job Rick had lost, and as the actor discusses it, Rick starts to lose heart. Sharon makes a visit to a bookstore while out and about in the city to pick up a gift for her spouse. She goes to a theater to view the film in which she acted after leaving that location. She is informed of the admission charged by the ticket seller, and as she is ready to pay, she inquires as to whether she must pay further because she acted in the film. However, the woman doesn't recognize her, so she needs to give her manager, Ruben, a call. Ruben doesn't know Sharon when she introduces herself, but eventually the manager lets her in to see the movie for free. The ticket taker asks for a photo before Sharon enters the screening room. After she has it, she enters to view the film. She can't help but seem happy as she watches it and appreciates her acting. She also thinks it's great that people are watching the movie, in her opinion. In the meantime, Rick's acting movie set is getting ready for action. He eventually forgets his words a few times when his character is chatting to James. Rick feels that he's not doing a good job, so he gets scared and chooses to leave. But Sam persuades him to complete the sequence and fix his error. After saying this, he and James recline at the table and the scenario is resumed. However, Rick returns to his trailer after the scene and accuses his bad performance on his drinking. Embarrassed, he also begins to smash objects around. Not long after, he makes the decision to give up alcohol in order to improve. Rick performs brilliantly in the following scene, and Trudy is present as well. Rick is on the verge of tears as Trudy remarks that the acting was the greatest she has ever seen, and Sam compliments him on how wonderfully he did. In another scene, Cliff runs across Pussycat again while cruising the streets. This time, he pulls over to offer her a lift since she mentions that she's heading to a ranch, one of the locations he and Rick had previously worked on. When she finds out about his profession while they are in the vehicle, she tells him that being a stuntman is better than being an actress, even if he doesn't truly believe it. A woman named Squeaky, who is in a room with a few other individuals, hears the sound of a car just as they get to the ranch. She orders Snake, a female, to go check who it is, and she alerts Squeaky when she spots Cliff and Pussycat. Pussycat constantly asking herself why there aren't more people around as she holds Cliff to accompany her on her walks. Next, Gypsy, a woman, stops by to say hello, and Pussycat introduces her to Cliff. Then Gypsy says that everyone has departed for a trip, including Charlie, their leader. Pussycat says she feels Cliff would appreciate her new acquaintance, so she wishes Charlie was here to introduce him. While they are conversing, Gypsy leaves and asks one of the local females to let a man by the name of Tex know that he should come check out the stranger. Soon after arriving, Tex chooses to depart after spending some time chatting with Cliff because it doesn't appear that the stranger would create any problems. Cliff, nevertheless, queries about George, the ranch's owner, as Tex departs. Every woman appears anxious when asked this question. Cliff believes he needs to say hello to George now that he knows he still lives there, but Gypsy advises him not to. Pussycat adds that George is probably asleep, but Cliff wonders what they may be hiding because of how tense everyone appears to be. As he makes his way toward the house, where Squeaky, Snake, and the others are hiding, he declares that he will still check on George. Squeaky is alerted by Snake that Cliff is approaching the home, and she orders everyone to go so she can deal with him. Cliff arrives at the entry just as Snake and the others are leaving. Squeaky is then inside the home, asking Cliff what he wants. She claims George is asleep, but he claims he is there to see him. Cliff insists he wants him still, and Squeaky grants him entry. He walks into the messy-looking room and finds George sleeping there, to which Squeaky also adds that he has lost his sight. When Cliff enters the room, he finds George dozing. Even after he identifies himself, the elderly guy doesn't recognize him when he wakes him up. Cliff continues, stating that the way the women were acting was the sole reason he wanted to check up on him. Before Squeaky gets upset, George claims he's okay and that he should return to bed. Cliff queries them about whether or not they are abusing him, but George responds that Squeaky adores him. After saying this, he leaves and discovers Pussycat waiting for him outside. He apologizes for embarrassing her, according to her. She climbs the car and yells that he's blind as he leaves after telling her he doesn't know what they've done to George. As he gets to the car, he notices that someone has punctured one of the tires, and all the other residents of the neighborhood begin shouting at him as well. He turns to glance around and discovers that the person who did it is a man by the name of Clem. Cliff claims that his boss owns the automobile, and he won't allow Clem to cause him any problems. He instructs Clem to mend it and pulls out a spare tire. Cliff hits him and makes him do it in front of the women when he resists. Gypsy instructs one of the girls to go fetch Tex while all of this is going on. But Cliff has already departed, and Clem has already patched the tire before Tex arrives. When Cliff arrives at Rick's house to pick him up from the set, Rick extends an invitation for Cliff to attend the premiere of his new program, which is airing that evening. The two men enter and take in the performance. 6 months later, Rick receives a call from Marvin reminding him of the earlier offer. Rick chooses to accept the position because he's not doing well, and he moves to Italy to begin filming. After a while, Rick earns a lot of money and gains a lot of popularity from his leading parts in Italy. In addition, he marries Francesca, and a few months later, he makes the decision to return to the United States with Cliff, who is with him in Italy. Rick informs Cliff before the trip that he can no longer afford to pay him for his continued presence. After both guys agree to have fun together for the last time when they get to Los Angeles, Cliff says he understands. In the meantime, Sharon has become pregnant and has even ready a room in the house for her unborn child. She also goes out later that evening with Jay and a few other pals, and they all return home together. When Rick and Cliff get to Los Angeles, they decide to visit a pub. But after drinking too much, they take a cab out of there. Cliff gets up and walks his dog once he gets to the house. Tex pulls into the area in an extremely old automobile just as he is about to depart. Rick becomes enraged by the loud engine noise of the automobile and walks outside to tell him to stop. As he yells at Tex and the other passengers in the car, he appears to be genuinely angry. Even though Tex knows Rick is armed and feels horrible about the way he's yelling at them, he chooses not to shoot Rick and instead simply speeds off. Tex informs the women in the car that they still need to do the task Charlie set them when they drive a little outside of the area. He claims that Charlie gave him the order to kill everyone at Terry's former residence. Now, since Rick is still awake, the ladies are less certain about it because it's possible that other residents of the area are also awake. Tex, though, is adamant that they follow instructions. At that moment, Katie, one of the women, identifies Rick as a movie star. Although Sadie and Flowerchild, the other females, are not very familiar with him, Tex is also aware of this. Abruptly, Sadie claims that the majority of the killings in the movies she saw as a child were real, and because they are now set in Hollywood, the home of most performers, they can murder them all because that is how she learned to kill. This inspires Tex and the others, and they exit the vehicle. Flowerchild stops on their way to Rick's house and claims she left her knife in the car. Tex hands her the keys so she can go retrieve it, but as they wait for her, she takes off and leaves the car behind. Tex instructs Katie and Sadie to remain focused on the task in spite of everything. As Cliff gets back to Rick's house, he is playing music in his backyard with headphones and begins preparing something for the dog to eat. Cliff's dog detects Tex and the others approaching the home abruptly. Cliff first doesn't understand why his dog is barking, but as soon as Tex and the women go inside, he does. Tex asks Cliff whether anybody else is home while pointing a pistol at him. Cliff clarifies that there is just one person, and Katie brings Francesca into the living room as soon as she checks and notices her. Cliff sees Tex at that precise time, and just before he fires, he gives his dog the go-ahead to attack Tex as Sadie lunges at Cliff when the dog is attacking Tex, but he hurls a dog food can at her face, seriously injuring her. Then, as he kills Tex and Francesca assaults Katie, he commands the dog to approach her. But before Katie can strike back, Francesca flees. Cliff then beats her till she passes away as she lunges at him and stabs him. Sadie tries unsuccessfully to remove the dog from her body, but at last she manages to grab Tex's rifle and fire away. Cliff, who has lost a lot of blood, collapses to the ground while Sadie keeps firing and hits a glass door that leads to the backyard with the swimming pool. Rick eventually pulls off his headphones and understands what's occurring when he hears the glass breaking. Rick dashes into the home, returns with a flamethrower, and uses it to burn her alive while she's still firing from within the pool. Then he enters to see how Cliff and Francesca are doing. When the police show there shortly after, they take Cliff's, who is now conscious, and Francesca's statements in addition to Rick's. Rick offers to accompany Cliff as he is being brought to the hospital, but Cliff begs him to go be with his wife. He then compliments Cliff on being a nice buddy, to which Cliff responds that he just makes an effort. At that moment, Jay arrives at the Polanski residence's gate and asks Rick what transpired. Jay wonders whether everyone is all right when he finishes explaining everything. Inquiring about what's going on over the gate's intercom system, Sharon also asks Jay about the actor next door while he answers her questions. Rick responds on his own after that, stating that he's doing okay. She invites Rick in for a drink with her and her other pals as it appears that she and Jay are both fans of Rick's films.